Hi, and welcome to Reddit Confessions. Tonight's story starts with a fork clinking against a wine glass, and a sentence no one was supposed to hear. Honestly, if I could go back in time, I'd never marry him. Biggest mistake of my life. That's what she said. Not in private. Not in a whisper. Not in a moment of heated argument behind closed doors. She said it while carving turkey at her parents' dinner table, smiling between bites of stuffing, in front of her family and mine. And the worst part? She didn't even know I was standing behind her. I was carrying a tray of extra napkins because someone spilled cider. I hadn't even made it back to my seat before I heard those words. Plain, sharp, final. No one noticed me freeze in the hallway. No one saw my knuckles whiten around the tray or the way my knees buckled slightly under the weight of 10 paper napkins and a truth I never thought I'd hear. They just kept eating, kept sipping wine, kept pretending nothing happened. But I heard it. Every word. Her mother let out one of those tight, polite laughs. The kind people use when they want to change the subject without addressing the bomb that just landed on the tablecloth. Someone mumbled, "Corinne, that's not funny." She shrugged and said, "Just being real." I stood there longer than I should have, pretending I was waiting for someone to move so I could pass. But really, I was just crumbling. She said it so casually, like she'd rehearsed it in her head 1,000 times and finally found the perfect audience to test it on. And in that moment, something in me didn't break, it disconnected. Quietly, like a lamp being unplugged. I returned to the table, handed the napkins to her cousin without saying a word, and sat down. I didn't need another bite. I just stared at my plate, wondering how a marriage dies, not with shouting, but with one sentence over cranberry sauce. And while she kept laughing, kept sipping her wine like nothing happened, she had no idea what was coming. Because exactly 1 hour later, her smile disappeared. And it wasn't because of revenge. It was because of the envelope I slipped into her purse when no one was watching. But we'll get there. When I slid the envelope into her purse, my hands didn't even tremble. I think I was too far gone for that. There's a difference between heartbreak and detachment, and somewhere between her words and my silence, I'd crossed the bridge between the two. I remember watching her laugh after dessert like nothing happened. Her lipstick stained the rim of her wine glass, and she kept brushing her hair back like she was in a perfume commercial. People around her laughed, nodded, clinked forks. No one had any idea there was a time bomb tucked beneath her leather wallet and travel-size lotion. The envelope was simple, white, unsealed. I didn't need theatrics. I just needed her to read it. Inside was a single photo, one I took last Thursday, of her, at the downtown cafe, across from a man she told me she hadn't seen in years. The man whose name she had accidentally deleted from her contact list months ago. The same man who, I now know, never really left her life. They were leaning in close. She was touching her necklace, a nervous habit. He was holding her hand across the table. And both of them were smiling like they were exactly where they belonged. I didn't confront her. I didn't rage. I didn't cry. I just quietly followed my gut that day, took a sick day from work, and waited with a borrowed camera from my coworker Jeff, who's into bird photography, bless him. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't even justice. It was documentation. Proof. The truth, printed in color. The note I folded behind the photo was only 6 words. I heard you. I saw everything. That's it. No threats. No questions. No begging. After dinner, while coats were being gathered and leftovers packed, I stood by the front door pretending to scroll through my phone. She handed her purse to her sister to grab something from the car. I slipped it in then. A 3-second motion. She never noticed. We drove home in silence. Not unusual. She fell asleep on the couch. Also not unusual. What was unusual, what made my stomach turn like a washing machine on spin cycle, was how peaceful she looked. Like someone who'd finally let go of something heavy. Like she didn't regret what she said at dinner. Like maybe, just maybe, she'd been hoping I heard it. And maybe, she didn't care if I did. I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling all night, wondering how long someone can pretend their house isn't on fire if they're the one holding the matches. At 6:12 a.m., I heard her gasp. Then footsteps. Then the sound of the bathroom door closing, hard. She read it. I waited. She didn't come out for 40 minutes. And when she did, her face was pale, hair wet, mascara smudged. We didn't talk. Not that morning. Not the next one either. But on the third day, she finally said something. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a confession. It was something else entirely. And what she said shattered whatever pieces of me I still believed were intact. It was Thursday morning, 3 days after the envelope. I was halfway through stirring a spoonful of instant coffee when she finally broke the silence. She stood in the hallway in her robe, arms crossed, looking at me like I was something she couldn't quite recognize anymore. Not hate, not love, something in between. That dangerous place where apathy lives and grows. "You're so dramatic," she said. "No good morning. No how did you sleep." Just that. 3 cold words tossed across the room like a stone skipping on water. I didn't respond. I just kept stirring. The clinking of the spoon inside the mug felt louder than her voice, but somehow less bitter. "I didn't mean it like that," she added, walking toward the fridge, pulling it open just long enough to pretend she needed something. "It was a joke. We were drinking. Everyone knew I didn't mean it." I looked at her then, really looked. Not the way you look at someone you love. The way you look at someone you've just realized might not actually exist in the form you thought they did. Like finding out the ocean you loved as a child was just a deep puddle with a painted sky over it. "If it was a joke," I said finally, voice barely above a whisper, "why did no one laugh?" She didn't answer that, just sighed and grabbed a yogurt she wouldn't finish. She had a habit of starting things and leaving them half done. Diets, journals, conversations. Me. "I don't know what kind of game you're playing," she muttered, slamming the fridge door a little harder than necessary. "But leaving that in my purse, that was low. That was low." I wanted to laugh. Actually laugh. Because compared to what she did, emotionally, spiritually, whatever this slow bleed of years had been, a single envelope felt like a post-it note on a burning building. "Did you sleep with him?" I asked. Just like that. Flat. Not accusatory. Like asking someone if they fed the cat. She didn't blink. "No," she said. "Not that it's any of your business at this point." And that was when I realized something deeper was broken than just our marriage. It was our language. Our definition of us. Of truth. It didn't matter if she had or hadn't. She wanted me to believe she had. Or worse, she wanted me to doubt myself forever. That was her power now. Not in what she did, but in how little she cared if I ever knew for sure. The rest of the day passed like wet cement. Heavy, gray, quiet. She left for work without another word, slamming the door like punctuation. I stayed home, called in sick. Again, my boss didn't even ask anymore. I sat on the couch, staring at the frame above the mantel. Our wedding photo. She had daisies in her hair. I had more hair back then too. We were smiling. Not fake smiling. The real kind. The kind that makes your cheeks hurt. I remember the exact moment the photographer took that shot. She had just whispered, "You're the safest place I've ever known." Now she looks at me like I'm a draft she forgot to delete. And I don't know what's worse, that she changed, or that she was never who I thought she was in the first place. But here's the thing. That night, I found something. Something that proved the photo wasn't the only thing she lied about. And the second I saw it, I realized this was much bigger than a hurtful dinner comment. Much bigger than an old flame at a coffee shop. She had secrets, and they were about to rip through the last threads of what little I still believed in. Later that night, after she fell asleep with her back turned toward me, again, I sat in the dark living room with only the faint glow of the router light on the wall. I couldn't sleep. Couldn't even close my eyes. Every time I did, I heard it again, like a phantom echo lodged in my chest. Biggest mistake of my life. It looped behind my eyes like a poisoned lullaby. I don't know what made me do it. I wasn't looking for revenge. I wasn't even sure I wanted answers. But something, maybe just years of being slowly erased, pulled me toward her laptop bag sitting by the kitchen chair. She always kept it zipped, even at home. Even in our bedroom. I'd never looked inside. Never thought I had to. But that night, I did. And that's when I found it. Not the laptop. Not her charger. But a second phone. Smaller. Older. Like one of those backup phones they sell at the airport. No case. No lock screen. Just dust and silence. It wasn't hers. At least, it wasn't one I'd ever seen. I hesitated for a moment. That guilty feeling crept in. The one you get before reading someone's diary or opening a drawer they told you not to touch. But guilt felt ridiculous now. She'd made it clear I wasn't even worth pretending for anymore. The phone powered on fast. Battery half full. That alone told me it had been used recently. No password. No signal. But it didn't need one. There was a folder on the home screen called Work Notes. A folder that, despite its name, had nothing to do with work. Inside were screenshots, dozens of them. Some were just texts, flirty at first, then intimate. From someone named R. She called him my calm. He called her my fire. It was like reading a novel I had no idea was being written while I was mowing the lawn and taking out the trash. But then it got worse. There were pictures, not indecent, nothing that'd break YouTube's rules, but intimate in a different way. Her and R, together at bars, inside hotel lobbies, sitting on a bench near a lake I didn't recognize, her leaning on his shoulder, his arm wrapped tightly around her waist. She was smiling in those photos in a way I hadn't seen in years. That hurt more than anything, because it confirmed a feeling I'd been trying to kill for months, the feeling that I had become invisible to her, but someone else had turned on the light. I scrolled for over an hour. There were notes too, journal entries, maybe, written in her voice, talking about how suffocated she felt, how she wanted to live without constantly apologizing for not being in love, how she was waiting for the right moment to start over with him. The right moment, not if, when. She was planning it. The dinner table comment, that wasn't a slip. It was foreshadowing, a test, a warning shot in disguise. And I'd been too numb, too slow, too desperate to see the fire before it caught the walls. I set the phone down gently, like I was afraid it might burn through the table. She was still asleep when I walked back into the bedroom. Her breathing was steady, peaceful. Mine wasn't. I stared at the ceiling again, but this time, I wasn't asking how we got here. I was asking myself what came next. Because now, I had all the proof I needed. I could confront her, blow everything up, call her parents, show everyone what she really was behind that perfect smile and curated life. But I didn't want revenge. I wanted her to feel something, anything. So I made a choice. And what I did the next morning changed everything. The next morning, the house was silent, except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the floorboards settling. She was still asleep when I got up. That wasn't unusual. What was unusual was the fact that I made breakfast. Not toast. Not cereal. A real breakfast. Eggs, crisped edges. Bacon, curled just right. French pressed coffee. Sliced fruit on a white plate like we used to do when we first moved in. I even folded a cloth napkin beside her fork. Everything placed with purpose. Intentionally calm. Carefully composed. I set the table for two. She walked in 20 minutes later, still in her robe, rubbing her eyes like a cat, confused by the smell. "What's all this?" she asked, blinking hard, like she wasn't sure if she was still dreaming. I didn't look at her right away. I poured her coffee instead, gently, like I'd rehearsed it. "Thought I'd do something nice," I said. "We haven't had breakfast together in a while." She sat down slowly, cautiously, like she was waiting for something to explode. But nothing did. Not yet. I made sure of that. We ate in silence. Her fork scratched the plate in small, careful motions. I watched her across the table without speaking, just observing, measuring. She glanced at me a few times, her eyes scanning like she was searching for landmines. "Look," she finally said, clearing her throat. "If this is about the dinner thing again, I told you." "This isn't about dinner," I interrupted calmly. My voice didn't rise. My hands didn't shake. That startled her more than yelling ever could. She tilted her head, wary. "Then what is it about?" I reached down beside my chair and placed a folder on the table. Plain. Thin. Nothing dramatic. But it might as well have been a stick of dynamite. She didn't touch it. Not at first. "What is that?" she asked, voice tighter now. "I found your other phone," I said simply. She froze. A blink too long. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. For once, she had no script ready. "I know about R," I added. "I saw the messages. The photos. The journal entries." Her face drained of color, like watching ink being pulled from a painting. "You went through my things," she finally managed, but the voice behind it was hollow. Weak. "No," I said. "I walked through a door you left wide open." She didn't argue that. Couldn't. Because we both knew the truth had already surfaced, and no amount of spinning could shove it back underwater. "I didn't do anything physical," she whispered, almost like she was convincing herself. I nodded. "That's probably the only boundary you haven't crossed. Yet." Then I stood. "You don't have to explain. Not now. Not ever. I'm not here to fight. I just wanted you to know that I know. That I've been watching, quietly. Listening. Putting the pieces together while you thought I was too tired or too small to notice." Her eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in a long time. Panic. Not guilt. Not regret. Fear. Fear that the man she thought would always stay, the one she could push and pull like a curtain, might finally be pulling back. I haven't told anyone, I added. Not your parents. Not your sisters. Not HR. But that folder, that's a mirror. You can either look in it, or keep pretending your reflection belongs to someone else. I walked past her without waiting for a response. Grabbed my jacket. Picked up my car keys. Where are you going? She asked, standing now half panicked. I'm not leaving, I said. But I'm not staying like this either. And I meant it. Because while I wasn't ready to torch the whole house down, I had finally learned how to stop offering myself as kindling. What she did next would determine everything. And what she did that afternoon shocked me more than the affair ever could. I wasn't gone long. 2, maybe 3 hours. Drove without a destination. Just needed the air. The sky was heavy with winter clouds, but the roads were dry. I passed the old bookstore we used to visit when we first moved in together. Saw the coffee shop where she used to wait for me after work. Everything familiar suddenly looked like a photograph from someone else's life. When I came home, I expected her to be in the living room, waiting to talk. Maybe crying. Maybe angry. Maybe ready to lie. But the house was dead quiet. The kitchen light was off. No music playing. No smell of dinner. I set my keys down and stood there for a moment, listening for any sign of her. That's when I saw it. Her phone. Her real one. The one I knew, sitting on the counter. Screen up. Unlocked. It was open to a text thread. I shouldn't have looked, but by now, privacy felt like a foreign concept. She had forfeited that luxury the moment she created a second life and gave it a folder called Work Notes. There were only 2 messages visible on the screen. One from her, sent just 15 minutes earlier. He knows. And one reply from the contact saved as R. I'll handle it. I didn't know what that meant. Not fully, but something about the wording made my stomach twist. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't emotional. It was calculated. Cold. Like this wasn't a relationship, it was a strategy. I checked the hallway. Her coat was gone. So were her boots. I assumed she'd gone out to think, to cool off. Maybe even to find him. Maybe that was the plan all along. I didn't call her. I didn't text. I just sat at the dining table, staring at the same spot where she'd once blown out birthday candles 2 years ago. We'd laughed that night. She'd kissed my cheek. Now I couldn't even picture her doing that without flinching. An hour passed. Then 2. Then came the knock. Not loud. Just 3 steady raps on the front door. When I opened it, I expected a neighbor. A package. Maybe her, trying to be dramatic. But it wasn't her. It was a man. Maybe late 30s. Clean cut. Tan jacket. Calm expression. The kind of calm that immediately puts you on edge. He didn't introduce himself. Didn't smile. Are you Meryl? He asked. I nodded slowly. Yeah. He didn't extend a hand. Just looked past me, like he was scanning the house. Corinne said you found the phone. My chest tightened. Who are you? He didn't answer that. Instead, he said, there are some things you don't understand. Things that have nothing to do with you. It'd be smart to let this go. It wasn't a threat. Not exactly. But it wasn't a request either. I stared at him, trying to piece together who this man really was. He didn't look like someone having an affair. He looked like someone doing a job. Then he added, Corinne cares about you. That's why I came instead of her. That hit me harder than I expected. Because if someone else was now being sent to speak on her behalf, to smooth over the mess she made, then I wasn't a husband anymore. I was a liability. A complication. I didn't respond. I didn't argue. He handed me a small envelope. Sealed. She said you'd understand. But don't open it yet. Not until tomorrow. Then he turned and left. No goodbye. No instructions. Just walked back to a black sedan and drove off like it was just another Tuesday. I closed the door and stood there for what felt like forever, envelope in hand, heart pounding with possibilities. What was in it? A letter? A confession? Something worse? Whatever it was, it meant she was done talking to me directly. And that terrified me more than anything she'd done before. I didn't sleep that night. And when morning came, I broke my promise. I opened the envelope. What I found inside made my hands go cold. Because it wasn't a letter. It was a contract. The envelope felt heavier than paper. I don't know how else to explain it, like it carried weight beyond its size. I sat on the edge of the bed, watching the light crawl across the floor as morning peeled through the blinds, and finally broke the seal. No shaking hands. Just slow, methodical dread. I unfolded the document expecting an apology, maybe a goodbye, or even, in some twisted way, a legal warning. But what I found wasn't anything I could have imagined. It was a contract, a real one, not a metaphorical "you broke my heart" type of document. A printed, formatted contract between two parties. I had to read the header 3 times before I believed what I was seeing. Confidential agreement, client-caretaker arrangement. Her name was on it. Corinne Allen. Signed, dated. Not from years ago, but from 4 months earlier. The second name was harder to process. Because it wasn't the man from the coffee shop. It wasn't the guy in the photos. It wasn't even anyone I knew. It was an LLC, a private entity registered to a shell consulting firm out of Baltimore. I Googled it in a panic. No website, no phone number, just a registry listing and a string of other businesses it had absorbed in the past 5 years. Buried in the paragraphs of legal-sounding jargon was something even more disturbing. Recipient will maintain personal companionship, verbal assurance, and discretion for the duration of the contract. Emotional disclosure is not required, nor is physical commitment. There were compensation terms, installments, non-disclosure clauses, a clause that read, should the recipient's spouse become aware of this agreement, communication will cease immediately and redirection protocol will activate. I stared at it for what felt like hours, trying to decode what this meant, trying to reconcile the woman I married, the one who once made playlists for our road trips and cried during dog commercials, with the one who signed a legal agreement for what amounted to emotional outsourcing. This wasn't an affair. This was something darker, more clinical, a transaction wrapped in the costume of connection. And suddenly, all the little moments came flooding back. The months she stopped looking at me when I spoke. The nights she said she was too drained to talk. The way she laughed louder when her phone buzzed, only to say it was just a work thing. I thought I was losing her to another man. But she had already sold pieces of herself to something more abstract. She didn't cheat in the traditional sense. She replaced me, deliberately, efficiently, piece by piece. And the man who showed up at my door wasn't her lover. He was her handler, her fixer, the one hired to clean up any mess that leaked outside the lines. I wanted to confront her, but something stopped me. Because deep down, I realized something chilling. She wasn't just hiding this from me. She was trying to protect herself from something bigger, something she willingly signed into. And now, I had proof. A contract that didn't just confirm betrayal. It exposed a part of her life that went far beyond marriage problems. I tucked the papers back into the envelope and locked it in the drawer of my nightstand. She still wasn't home. And when she finally walked through the door that evening, coat in hand, hair windblown, eyes glassy, she looked at me like nothing had happened. Like the silence of the past day was just another stretch of tension we'd eventually sweep under the rug. But I wasn't the same anymore. She sat on the couch, crossed her legs, and finally asked, "Did you open it?" I nodded. And she only said one thing in return. "Then you understand why I can't stop." I didn't. Not yet. But I would. Because what came next? It wasn't about marriage anymore. It was about escape. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of anger or even heartbreak, but because something inside me had finally shifted. There's a strange peace that comes when you stop trying to fix something that was never meant to survive. It's not surrender. It's clarity. The next morning, I didn't pack a suitcase. I didn't slam doors or scream or leave a dramatic note on the fridge. I just made 1 cup of coffee, sat across from her at the table, and quietly slid over a manila folder. Inside it was a single sheet of paper, a mutual separation agreement I'd printed the night before. No lawyers, no threats, no war. She looked at it like it was a mirror she didn't expect to see. "I'm not doing this out of hate," I said, "and I'm not asking you to explain. I just want to start breathing again. And I think you do too." To my surprise, she didn't argue. She didn't cry or call me weak. She just nodded, slowly, maybe even gratefully, like the weight of pretending was finally lifted off both our backs. A week later, she moved out. Not into his arms. Not into a new life of secrets. Just out. And me? I reclaimed the house. Not by throwing parties or pretending I was suddenly whole, but by learning how to exist in silence without it hurting. I repainted the walls, donated the bedspread we both hated, started walking every evening with no destination, just air in my lungs, just peace in my bones. Months passed. I've since started seeing someone new, not romantically, not yet, A friend. Someone I met at the library of all places. We talk about books and dogs and how weird life gets when you stop trying to control the narrative. And no, I'm not healed. Healing isn't a finish line. It's a practice. But every day I get a little better at being alone without feeling lonely. That, to me, is more valuable than any hollow promise of love. To anyone watching this, whether you've been hurt, replaced, or ghosted by someone who once swore they'd never stop loving you, just know this. You are not invisible. You are not small. And you are not their mistake. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is walk away without slamming the door. And if you've ever been in a situation where someone tried to replace love with manipulation or secrets, tell us your story in the comments. We want to hear your voice. You never know who might need to read it right now. Thanks for watching. This has been Reddit Confessions. See you in the next story.